When we think about a society collapsing, what comes to mind? Probably chaos, right? Well, what if it could happen not with a bang, but with a quiet, collective sigh? That's the really challenging idea we're going to dig into today, from this analysis called Governing Identity. Let's jump right in.
So this quote, this is really the heart of the whole thing. It just completely flips the script on what we imagine societal failure looks like, right? We picture revolutions, total chaos. But this analysis, it suggests the real danger is much quieter, almost sneaky. It's the danger of a society that just gives up in silence.
Okay, so what does that actually mean, collapse through silence? Well, the source uses this really powerful metaphor. It calls it a fracture without bleeding. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's a way of looking at a societal crisis that is so different from what we're used to seeing in the movies.
And this really lays out the difference, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the myth, the stuff of movies, riots, upheaval, armies at the gates. But on the other side, that's the reality this analysis is talking about. It's not loud. It's this deep, quiet exhaustion. People aren't storming the castle. They're quietly looking for a way out. They're not overthrowing the government. They're just working around it. It's a totally different kind of breakdown.
And this right here is such a critical point. It's like the main diagnostic tool the source gives us. Just because things look calm on the surface, no riots in the streets, doesn't mean everything's okay. In fact, that quiet might be something else entirely. It might be the sound of resignation, the silence of millions of people who've just given up hope that the system can ever actually fix itself.
So the big question is, what's causing this silent fracture? Where does it come from? Well, the analysis points to one single core mechanism. It's a specific way of running things that it calls governing by identity. Let's unpack what that really means.
Okay, so at its core, governing by identity is all about managing a society using these permanent, inherited identities. But the key part, the really important phrase here, is rather than dissolving their relevance. See, the argument is that when a government locks these identities in place, using them for things like jobs or justice, instead of trying to make them less and less important, well, that's when you trigger a really dangerous chain reaction.
And you can kind of see that chain of events right here. It all starts with a well-intentioned attempt to manage historical injustice, but not quite resolve it. The problem is that management ends up accidentally making the divisions permanent, stabilizing the very thing it was supposed to fix. And over time, that whole system of correction just freezes solid. It becomes a permanent feature. And the end result? You guessed it, that silent fracture we've been talking about.
This brings us to something that's, well, it's both fascinating and kind of tragic. The source calls it the correction paradox. It's this deep, deep irony where the very tools you create to fix a problem end up making that problem permanent, just in a new way. Now, we have to be super clear on this next point because it's crucial. This analysis is not saying the intentions were bad, not at all. It makes it very clear that these policies were born from a real, urgent moral need to fix some deep historical wrongs. The original intent? It was absolutely coming from the right place. And you can see how this whole thing plays out over time. Right at the beginning, these policies are introduced as temporary fixes, right? A remedy. But here's the catch. They often don't have any built-in end dates or review periods, what people call sunset clauses. So without that off-ramp, they just start to harden. What started as a temporary remedy becomes a permanent part of the system. It's like the medicine becomes part of the daily diet. And man, this quote just sums up the whole paradox perfectly. The failure, it wasn't the decision to try and correct history. Of course not. The failure, according to this argument, was in the inability to exit correction. It was creating a system that had no off-ramp, no way to ever say, okay, we're done here. The job is finished.
So, okay, what does this actually look like in the real world? What are the symptoms of a society that's being hollowed out from the inside? Well, the analysis points to some very clear signs that this silent collapse is actually underway.
First up, you see people just bypassing the official systems. They stop expecting a fair shake from the institutions that are supposed to help them. So instead, they start looking for workarounds. Another way to get things done.
And of course, when that starts happening, what's next? Trust. It just evaporates. The buildings are still standing. The officials are still having their meetings, but their moral authority, their legitimacy in the eyes of the people, it's just gone.
And that leads to what might be the most important symptom of all. Hope gets privatized. Think about that. People completely lose faith in the idea of a shared public good. The hope for a better future, it stops being a collective goal. It becomes a private one.
It's all about me and my family. And that bigger idea of building a better society together, it just fades into the background. So, here are the specific social signals you can look for. And notice the pattern here. It's not about loud rebellion. It's about quiet retreat. Young people, they aren't protesting in the streets anymore. They're quietly looking up visa requirements online. Citizens stop demanding justice. They just start looking for those workarounds we talked about. And fairness, it stops being a public good and starts feeling more like a personal gamble.
Now, it would be really easy to think, okay, this sounds like a problem specific to one country or one situation. But the analysis makes a really compelling case that no, this is actually a much larger global pattern.
The source actually uses India as its main case study, but not because it's some kind of anomaly. It's because it serves as a really powerful example of this global pattern. The underlying mechanics are the same anywhere you see inherited status getting locked into the official system.
And you can see this pattern pop up all throughout history, right? From Japan's Burakumin to Korea's Baekjeong, all the way to outcast communities in Europe and Asu systems in Africa. Look, societies have always had to deal with inherited stigma. The crucial difference, the thing this analysis really hammers home, is the choices society makes. Do you work to make those old hierarchies irrelevant over time, or do you freeze them in place by making them an official part of the system?
Which really brings us to the ultimate takeaway here. The true test of society's health isn't whether or not it has injustice. Let's be real, every society does. The real test is whether it still has the capacity to honestly correct itself. The moment a society loses that ability, that's when the silent fracture really takes hold.
And so, we're left with this one final, really powerful question to think about. What happens when a society tries to build its future on the permanent administration of its past? There's definitely no easy answer to that one, but it really forces you to think about that razor-thin line between learning from history and being completely trapped by it. It's a sobering thought, for sure. Thanks for digging into this with me.